afternoon. Our royal commentator Alistair Bruce there with reaction to that breaking news that the Duke of York will be tried over allegations he sexually assaulted Virginia Giuffre when she was underage. A US judge has ruled that her civil lawsuit can proceed. We expect that to start in September, so later this year, outlining his reasons to deny a motion to dismiss the civil case against the Duke of York. The judge involved, Judge Lewis Kaplan, said Ms. Giuffre's complaint is neither unintelligible nor vague nor ambiguous. It alleges discrete incidents of sexual abuse in particular circumstances at 3 identifiable locations. It identifies to whom it attributes that sexual abuse. The defendant nevertheless holds out that he cannot reasonably prepare a response because the plaintiff has not described what purported sexual contact occurred, when and where the incident occurred, or the forcible compulsion she was under due to express or implied threat to the degree of specificity he would like. While he understandably seeks more detail about the precise details of the plaintiff's claims, he will be unable to obtain that detail during pre-trial discovery. Moreover, the defendant's assertion that he cannot reasonably prepare a response to the plaintiff's allegations plainly contradicts the content of his moving papers, in which he denies Ms. Giuffre's allegations in no uncertain terms. Well, that is what the judge has had to say in explaining why he has denied a motion to dismiss this civil case. Let's bring in Mark Stevens, international lawyer at Howard Kennedy. Mark Stevens, good to see you this afternoon. Your reaction to this breaking news this afternoon?
I think this was not particularly surprising, Sarah Jane. As a consequence of the way in which this case was argued, I think we all thought that Prince Andrew was not going to be successful today. I think this judge will set the sort of aggressive timetable that he's indicated previously, but I think he knows he's also probably going to be the subject of an appeal by Prince Andrew's legal team. And so he'll likely list it for towards the end of November, the beginning of December, which will give a window of opportunity for Prince Andrew's team not only to prepare for the trial, but also to conduct any appeal that they think is going to be viable.
So, Mark, from this point on, we can expect an appeal from Prince Andrew's team and perhaps a settlement as well, as so often happens before these civil cases are taken further.
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, the situation here is that there is a good legal point. The position is that the Prince Andrew's legal team have been stonewalling. It's clearly that which has irritated this judge, who thinks that they should get to the merits quickly. But one of the points that they've come across, this one about the settlement, does have some merit in it. It's not a slam dunk for either side. And you can see the legal merits shorn of the morality of this particular case, some would say immorality of this case, that he can appeal and he's got good grounds to do so. But I suspect that this is a case which is going to go to trial. And the stonewalling tactics of Prince Andrew's lawyers have been to attempt to delay it. He's not in a great position now. Can he get in a better position? No, he can't. Can he make it worse? Yes, he can make it an awful lot worse by going to America and having to give evidence. And I think the only option, if he fails on his appeal, is to settle. Everybody will take that as an admission of guilt, but it's less damaging for him than to go through the trial, the public spectacle of the details of what happened. And of course, many people will think much the worse of him if he puts Virginia Giuffre through the mill of having to go to court, as we saw with the Ghislaine Maxwell women, had to go through and relive their experiences in public. Fairly traumatic, I think.
Ms. Giuffre is suing the Queen's son for allegedly sexually assaulting her when she was a teenager. The Duke has vehemently denied these allegations, and his legal team has argued from the lawsuit's first hearing that the case is baseless. However, we now have the prospect of this civil case towards the end of the year. We understand that Virginia Giuffre is seeking unspecified damages, but there is speculation that the sum could be in the millions of dollars, Mark.
Yes, and I think that the answer to that is absolutely. She had the opportunity of suing in London. She wouldn't have got anything like the damages in America. In America, I think you can expect to see many millions of dollars in damages. And so I think that if he's going to be shelling out for lawyers and shelling out for damages, he may be better off cutting his losses and just shelling out to Virginia Giuffre, settling this, draw a line. He's not going to be rehabilitated, but he protects the rest of the royal family from what would otherwise be an appallingly damaging experience of him fighting these kinds of allegations in court, in public.
Mark Stevens, if the hearing does go ahead, it's not clear whether Prince Andrew will give evidence in person via a video link or decline to participate.
Yeah, there's a quirk of law between England and America. So if Virginia Giuffre obtains what's called a default judgment, that is, Prince Andrew doesn't turn up to defend himself, she will be able to get a vindication from the court in New York, but the damage award that the jury gives her will not be enforceable in this country. Prince Andrew, and indeed any defendant in this country who gets a default judgment against them in America, it's not enforceable here. So they can only go against assets in America. And of course, Prince Andrew won't have any there. So that would be a sort of Pyrrhic victory, but I think the moral opprobrium that would come on Prince Andrew taking advantage of a technicality of that kind would just be too great to withstand. So this case has always been about damage limitation. The stakes just went up, and there's going to have to be some serious damage limitation now. I can't see a situation where the royal family, or indeed their legal advisors, are going to let Prince Andrew, first of all, go on oath, on videotape, for deposition. So they take video of the witness giving evidence under oath, under cross-examination, and then they replay that at the trial and cross-examine them on that. In this country, we reduce it all into writing. So you have witness statements, again, under oath, and you cross-examination on them.
All right, Mark Stevens, good to have you.
It's going to be too terrible.
Mark Stevens, good to have your expertise guiding us through what's happening this afternoon. Mark Stevens, international lawyer at Howard Kennedy, thank you. It is 3 o'clock. Our breaking news this afternoon. The Duke of York will face a civil sex case trial after a US judge dismissed a motion by Prince Andrew's legal team to have the lawsuit thrown out. The case has been brought by Virginia Giuffre, who claims that she was abused by Prince Andrew when she was 17. Prince Andrew's lawyer claimed a previous settlement agreed between Miss Giuffre and the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein meant she could not claim further damages. The Duke of York denies all the allegations made against him. Our royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills has this report.
A business event in Davos in January 2015 was the first time Prince Andrew publicly responded to the allegations.
I've just wished to reiterate and to reaffirm the statements which have already been made on my behalf by Buckingham Palace. My focus is on my work.
In the 7 years since then, the claims from Virginia Giuffre and this photograph have continued to haunt him. His attempt to shut it down with this interview 2 years ago backfired.
I have no recollection of ever meeting her.
And instead forced him to step down from royal duties. His state of self-imposed exile, mainly at Royal Lodge on the Windsor estate, led some charities to cut ties with him. But he still has links with a large number of organisations, even though he can't represent them in public. And more controversially, he has retained his ceremonial military titles, including Honorary Colonel of the Grenadier Guards. The decision by the judge to allow this civil case to continue severely hampers any hope of rebuilding his reputation anytime soon.
He's still the Colonel-in-Chief of a number of regiments in the British Armed Forces, which are in the personal gift of his mother, and he hasn't been stripped of those. But it's very difficult to see him coming out in public, and I mean, who would speak to him?
Reportedly the Queen's favourite son, there was a time where his military service in the Falklands was celebrated in the papers. But in recent years, headlines have been dominated by his relationship with paedophile Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Difficult not just for him, but the rest of the royal family.
There's absolutely no doubt that whatever happens, whatever good work, whatever attempts Charles and William have to try and find a sort of modern, relevant face of monarchy that re-engages with people after the death of the Queen, that Prince Andrew and the issues associated with that, and not taking responsibility really and being seen to apparently kind of duck and dive process is something that is going to really hang heavy, I think, over the royal family over the next few years.
Prince Andrew's absence has been particularly notable as his siblings have stepped up to be there for the Queen. Privately, they may be supportive of him, but publicly they have tried to distance themselves from the scandal. They will no doubt want to keep that silence as this deeply damaging saga continues. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
Well, let's get more from our correspondent Joe Pike, who was covering the story from New York and joins us now. Joe, the judge making this ruling within the last half an hour. What was his explanation for finding in favour of Virginia Giuffre?
Well, the key argument, Sarah Jane, that Prince Andrew's lawyers made at the start of last week in that court hearing was that there was this 2009 settlement between Virginia Giuffre and the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. She received $500,000 within that settlement. And in the text of the settlement, she agreed to not pursue other people in civil proceedings connected to Mr. Epstein. So the debate within court that day was all about whether Prince Andrew is covered, and the judge in his very long ruling, 40 or so pages, has said that 2009 agreement cannot be said to demonstrate clearly and unambiguously that the parties intended the instrument directly, primarily or substantially to benefit Prince Andrew. And this is not a huge surprise because in that hearing, the judge, Lewis Kaplan, was interrogating the lawyers for either side, and he seemed dismissive and sceptical of the legal arguments being made by Prince Andrew's lawyer. It wouldn't have been good. It wouldn't have been a good look, I don't think, if Prince Andrew had won this motion to dismiss, because ultimately he would be relying on that very controversial settlement. He would effectively be saying to Virginia Giuffre, you can't sue me because you settled with my paedophile friend. Now, his allies would argue, on the other hand, that this is about money. She has already received money, and it's not fair that she should pursue others too. Her allegation is that Prince Andrew sexually assaulted her 3 times when she was 17 years old in 3 locations. Firstly, in Ghislaine Maxwell's home in London. This is where this picture is taken. Reportedly, the photographer at this point was Jeffrey Epstein himself, the late paedophile. The second location was New York, where Jeffrey Epstein had a large home on the Upper East Side. And the third place that Virginia Giuffre alleges she was abused by Prince Andrew is on one of Jeffrey Epstein's islands in the US Virgin Islands. Now, Prince Andrew has consistently and strenuously denied all of those allegations. But what we're moving to now is the sort of second stage of this process of discovery, where we could find out more about the evidence that either side is holding. It's almost like they've held their cards quite close to their chest so far. Now they need to explain what they have. That could see Prince Andrew and Virginia Giuffre being deposed, them being questioned out of court, but under sworn oath, and that evidence then being submitted to the court. But of course, it's a massive moment of danger and jeopardy for the Duke of York. Effectively, his reputation, whether it's fair or not, has already been damaged. We're now talking about how far these allegations affect the reputation of the royal family. And I think that will be in the minds of the courtiers and key people involved in deciding whether or not to settle. That is the big decision for Prince Andrew now. Does he settle with Virginia Giuffre? Do they come to a legal agreement, one that would involve likely millions of dollars? And what does Virginia Giuffre want to do? Does she want to settle? Does she want the money? Or ultimately, does she want to pursue justice and the truth? She could make this very awkward for the Duke of York and for the royal family by continuing, dragging this out, trying to force a trial, even though trials in civil cases are incredibly rare. Certainly, whatever you think about the Duke of York, whatever you think about these allegations that he's consistently denied, we do know that 2 of his close friends were a paedophile in Jeffrey Epstein and a child sex trafficker in Ghislaine Maxwell. That has damaged his reputation, possibly irreparably. It's now, Sarah Jane, up to him and others within the palaces to decide how much all of this affects the reputation of the royal family.
Hey, Joe Pike, thank you. The Duke of York, of course, denies all allegations. Buckingham Palace today declining to comment to this breaking news, this latest development, saying we would not comment on what is an ongoing legal matter. Let's speak now to Spencer Couvin, a lawyer representing many of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. Mr. Couvin, your reaction to the breaking news this afternoon?
Thank you for having me on. This is a pivotal moment in the case, as everyone has mentioned. Once a litigant gets past the point of a motion to dismiss, that opens the door to discovery. In any civil litigation, discovery includes written discovery, requests for documents, but it also includes, most importantly and significantly for the Duke, a deposition. And there is no doubt that the attorneys for Virginia Giuffre are going to seek to take the deposition of the Duke of York. In addition to that, they could seek depositions of any other individuals who may have been present. That could include anyone within the royal family that may have been present during any of the conversations or anything that may have been said after the incident, or that could verify any of his background and alibi that he has stated very publicly in the interview that he gave.
And Mr. Couvin, perhaps you could explain how a deposition works, because it's not something we're familiar here with in the UK. It's very much something that happens in the US legal system. What is a deposition? Can Prince Andrew refuse to participate?
As a defendant in a case, a person cannot refuse to come forward for a sworn deposition. A deposition is sworn testimony. It's taken under oath, under penalty of perjury of the US law. And as many people may know or may not know, a few of the charges that were lodged against Ghislaine Maxwell, which she is now being charged criminally with and could be prosecuted on, were that she lied under oath in a civil deposition that was taken in another matter. So a civil deposition taken under oath, under penalty of perjury of US law, is very serious. And as a result, anything that is said under oath must be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And if someone lies under oath, that is a criminal prosecution in and of itself that could take place. These types of sworn testimony are taken every day. I do hundreds of them a year in civil cases. And I took numerous depositions of these witnesses in the Jeffrey Epstein matters when I represented those young girls here in the state of Florida. Those depositions, a person appears, there could be a video camera, there is always a court reporter taking down everything that is said, and the Duke would be entitled to have his own attorney present for that sworn testimony. And then the attorneys for Virginia Giuffre could ask any question they wanted. Now, as a civil litigant in the US, you have a constitutional right against self-incrimination. So because this is a US lawsuit, the Duke may refuse to answer questions under oath on the grounds that it may incriminate him, which is exactly what, by the way, Jeffrey Epstein did when I took his deposition in the litigation here in the States.
Who else can be deposed? Because there is a lot being made, because of the high profile of this case, about, for instance, members of the royal family being deposed or high-profile friends of Prince Andrew being deposed. Do they have to give a deposition, or can they refuse to take part? Because for Prince Andrew, this could get extremely messy. And as we say, from his point of view, it is all about protecting his innocence and his reputation.
Yes. So in a civil litigation, any witness with potential information can be deposed. Now, the attorneys for Virginia Giuffre will have to make a showing of why they want to take the deposition of someone who may be a member of the royal family, and they must make that showing to the court and then request the court's permission if it is someone of pivotal importance. Now, generally, any potential witness is subject to the subpoena power of the attorneys that are involved in the case. As an attorney and a member of the bar for the US courts and the Florida courts here in the United States, I can issue a subpoena for someone to appear for deposition. And if they refuse to comply with that subpoena, they could actually be held in contempt and put under arrest and taken to jail and then made to appear for a deposition. Now, what's important about this law is that it only applies if there is jurisdiction over the person. So someone who is not physically located here in the United States may not be under the jurisdiction of the court, and therefore they may not be compelled in certain circumstances.
Yes, that's what I was going to lead on to, because many people will remember when this first came to public light, there were a lot of questions about why the Duke of York would not travel to the United States to answer questions, legal, official, you know, all of that. How does that play, this transatlantic element, play into this civil case? Are there difficulties with the defendant being in the UK and the law in the United States being all the way over there?
Yes, that is going to be significant in the case itself. There are going to be legal issues, and I suspect they'll be filing motions on this issue for the court to rule on whether or not certain individuals can come within the jurisdiction of the court. In addition to that, please don't forget that at the time that this incident occurred, according to the allegations in the complaint, the Duke of York still potentially had diplomatic immunity at that time. Now, he has since been stripped of that by the Queen, but the allegations of when this occurred, he may have had diplomatic immunity at that time, and I suspect that will be one of the defenses to the case. In addition, there is a concept called sovereign immunity that needs to be argued to the court at some point in the litigation. But that will likely occur much later on in the litigation in something called a summary judgment proceeding. And that would have to occur after the depositions take place. Now, as to witnesses other than the Duke of York, those individuals have to be under the jurisdiction of the court. They must be here in the United States to be deposed. Otherwise, they would have to come here from out of country to volunteer for a deposition.
OK, Spencer, really good to explore this with you and look at some of the potential bumps in the road as we look towards the civil case that could be taking place towards the end of the year. We understand September or around then. And just a final question, if I may, because Spencer Cooven, you represented a number of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, and Virginia Giuffre, who's brought this civil case, is perhaps the most high-profile victim to go public. The Duke of York, of course, denies all allegations against him, but for Virginia Giuffre and alleged victims of sexual assault, what does this say about the reach of the law and that no one is above it?
Yes, and thank you for that. You know, one of the significant things to remember, and I represent victims of sexual assault across the United States and have been for many years, is that sexual assault is something that occurs to anyone and everyone. It happens to young boys, it happens to young women, it happens to older women, older men. This occurs across the world, not just here in the United States, and certainly not even in just the UK. So for victims to see someone with wealth and power, especially with the prosecution and conviction of Ghislaine Maxwell and now the continuing and ongoing litigation against the Duke of York, it empowers those victims to be able to come forward and speak their truth. And that is an incredibly important thing. And justice may be slow, but justice does come eventually. So what I would say to anyone who is, doing these types of acts, justice will come your way eventually.
Spencer Cooven, a lawyer representing many of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, really appreciate the level of your expertise talking us through these potential proceedings later in the year and, of course, talking about the victims and sexual abuse. Thank you so much for talking to us here on Sky News this afternoon. Well, just a reminder of the breaking news this afternoon. The Duke of York is going to be tried over allegations he sexually assaulted Virginia Giuffre when she was underage. A US judge has ruled that her civil lawsuit can proceed. The Duke of York denies all allegations against him. It's thought that the civil lawsuit, the case, will get underway towards the end of the year. The judge that made this ruling was Judge Lewis Kaplan. He published a lengthy ruling this afternoon as he delivered his decision. Here's some of what he had to say. The 2009 agreement cannot be said to demonstrate clearly and unambiguously the parties intended the instrument directly, primarily or substantially to benefit Prince Andrew. This is in relation to the agreement made between Virginia Giuffre and the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. He goes on to say the existence of the requisite intent to benefit him or others comparable to him is an issue of fact that could not properly be decided on this motion, even if the defendant fell within the releasing language, which itself is ambiguous. Well, we can get more reaction now from John Arledge, senior writer for the Sunday Times, who interviewed Prince Andrew in 2017. The decision not going the Duke of York's way today. Your reaction to this decision from the US?
Viewers of your programme and the rest of Sky News have seen us talk about this together over the recent years, and we've always been clear to say it'd be very, very difficult for the Duke to prevail in this case. And so it's come to pass. This really is the nightmare scenario for the Prince. He has, from the outset, tried to make this case go away. He's tried every single trick in the book to make it go away, and he's failed. And this was his last shot. This 2009 agreement, that was his last shot. The judge shot that down. That means he now has to engage with this court. He now has to give evidence. He now has to corroborate his story about Pizza Express in Woking and not being able to sweat. None of this will end well for him. And I think right now they must be turning, he and his lawyers must be turning their attention to see whether there's some way that they can actually settle this case before he has to engage with it, because all attempts to engage so far have ended in disaster for him.
Is that your inkling of what will happen? Because we've had some legal experts on this afternoon saying, you know, a settlement will be seen, the perception will be an admission of guilt.
Well, it depends whether he can, get as part of that settlement, say that there's no admission of guilt. I mean, the difficulty for him is, of course, is that an awful lot of people have already made up their mind about this case already. So he's going to have to balance whether what is going to be the least worst option. All options for him now are bad. I suspect all options for him mean that he will have no further role in public life whatsoever. I think he's completely finished, totally finished. The only question now is how to limit the damage. Is it going to be better, quote unquote, to settle, if he can settle? There's no reason that Virginia Giuffre will agree to settle, but let's say she did. Would that be less bad than engaging with the court case? Now, I mean, I can't imagine what he and his legal team must be thinking now, because there is nothing here that ends well. And as I said earlier, I think this really is the end for the Duke.
Yeah, you think Prince Andrew is finished after this, regardless of what the civil case decides?
Finished in his desire to have any kind of role in public life. I cannot see how he can appear in public and meet and greet people, given what he's going to have to do.
Well, it's innocent until proven guilty as well, isn't it? In terms of the Prince has denied all allegations, and you know, people can argue whether he went about it in the right way or the wrong way in terms of, you know, not facing up to the law or to the allegations. But in terms of if the civil case finds in his favour, you know, from his point of view, the argument could be, why shouldn't he return to public life? He will have been found innocent.
If he wins the case, then yes, of course. But if you look at what we know of this case, so far, the two pieces of evidence that he's presented to, as he would see it, get him off the hook, the Pizza Express in Woking and the I Don't Sweat, well, he's already admitted that he hasn't got any independent corroboration of those two pieces. He's going to have to, if he's going to engage, he's going to have to give evidence. Now, is he going to go to America to give evidence? Well, of course he's not going to do that. That would be incredibly stupid. So is he going to do it on a video link? Well, maybe he could do it on a video link, but as we know from his interview with Emily Maitland, he's completely hopeless at answering questions, any questions about himself even. He ends up, making it 10 times worse than he otherwise would have done if he'd said nothing. So every way he turns here, I think is marked disaster. And you can see that from the history up until now. So I think I suspect there will be thought given now to seeing if there's some form of no liability settlement. But the problem there is, will the other side accept it? Will Virginia Giuffre accept it? This is absolutely cataclysmically awful for the Duke. It's just, there's nothing even remotely good in this judgment. And I cannot see how he can manage to come out of this with any shred of public reputation, unless by some extraordinary turn of events, he engages with the action and he wins it.
OK, John Aldridge, really good to talk to you this afternoon from The Times. Thank you very much. He's interviewed Prince Andrew. Those are his thoughts on what has unfolded. Thank you for your time. I'm sure we will speak again. Just to remind you of that breaking news, the Duke of York is going to be tried over allegations he sexually assaulted Virginia Giuffre when she was underage. A US judge ruled that her civil lawsuit can proceed. A little earlier, I got the views of our royal commentator, Alistair Bruce. This was his reaction to today's ruling.
For Victoria Giuffre, this must be the most awful situation that she's faced. She's gone through such awful things, and the allegations that she makes against the Duke of York must now be dealt with in the civil case. And whilst I don't know much about the process that now needs to take place, I know that it'll be a matter of enormous concern to the Queen and to other members of the royal family, and no doubt the Duke of York will have to seriously consider the situation that he's in.
Yeah, it's Virginia Giuffre does get to have her day in court. She has long fought for, as you said, this will be of concern for the royal family. What will be going on behind the scenes? Because what a lot of people at home will be thinking, Alistair, is that this shows that nobody is above the law.
It's important that everyone is reassured by that very thing. No one is above the law. It doesn't matter how grand or how smart or how wealthy they may be. Here is a woman with allegations that are extremely serious, the most serious, and the court has upheld her right to have them heard. And that is something that, all of us should take reassurance from. The difficulty is that obviously there are two sides to every story, and that process must take its path. And it must be a matter of enormous concern to any family that finds a member of that family presented with this kind of charge. And I'm sure for the Queen, who is a mother, and all mothers love their children, will find this particularly tough. And yet this case must now be dealt with, and it must go through the proper process. And I'm sure that all people now are thinking most particularly about the poor woman who has faced what must have been the most awful things in her life. And she has these allegations, and they must be addressed.
This civil case is going to be heard in New York, Alistair, but it will make headlines across the globe. Prince Andrew has taken a back seat when it comes to royal duties. We haven't seen him publicly for some time now. What will happen to him in the interim? Because a lot of people are saying, he still holds royal titles, he still has a number of duties. Will they be taken away from him, or will the civil case not be prejudged by the Queen?
This is a matter for the royal household to advise the Queen on now, but we face a different circumstance than we did earlier on. This has now been taken to a different level by the judge's decision, and for the Queen, she will be looking for advice, but in the end, Her Majesty will make a decision. And undoubtedly what matters is that the institution that she is responsible for maintaining must be held above any scrutiny of too great a degree that might bring it into disrepute.
So you strike the right tone there when you say what is of importance is this case and these allegations made by Virginia Giuffre, the alleged victim of sexual assault here. But just to put it into wider context from your area of expertise as our royal commentator, this comes at a big time for the royal family. We have embarked on the Platinum Jubilee year.
I think everyone understands that the Queen's role as head of state has been beyond reproach for nearly 70 years, and that is one issue. Everyone also knows that families are complicated, and sometimes children find themselves in difficult situations. What matters here, though, as I was saying before, is that Virginia Giuffre has made a very clear allegation, and in the proper process of law, that must be attended to. And if the Queen represents anything in our kingdom, let alone around the world, and certainly under the United States, it's very similar. The Queen represents the fact that all people face the law equally under the processes of that which has been set up by statute. And in accordance with the judge's decision, this process must now go forward.
Let's join our correspondent Ali Fortescue now. She is outside Buckingham Palace for us this afternoon to react to the breaking news that the Duke of York will be facing a civil case regarding allegations of sexual assault in the United States. Ali, what happens next?
Well, it is now very likely that this civil case will go ahead. Martha Kellner, our US correspondent, saying that that could happen as early as in September. These are allegations, of course, that have dogged Prince Andrew for a long time, and there is no doubt that this is a highly significant moment and highly significant setback for the Prince today. The civil trial, the civil sex trial case is now going to very likely be going ahead. That is an extraordinary situation for a member of the royal family to be in. Of course, all of this is because, as we know, to remind people, Virginia Giuffre suing Prince Andrew, claiming that he abused her when she was 17 years old. She says that she was trafficked around the world by Jeffrey Epstein, the late financier, and forced to have sex with Prince Andrew, she says, on a number of occasions. He, of course, has always strenuously denied those allegations. You'll remember in that Newsnight interview, he said he had never even met Virginia Giuffre, but now this will likely be going to a trial. His lawyers on a number of occasions have tried to throw this case out. This latest attempt was based on a deal, a settlement that was reached between Miss Giuffre and Jeffrey Epstein, in which it would stop suing in connection with people that were connected to Mr. Epstein, but that the judge in New York today decided would not be enough to stop this, to dismiss this case, and it will now be going ahead. And of course, that is a very difficult thing, not just for Prince Andrew, but for Buckingham Palace more broadly.
Behind you, Buckingham Palace have said we will not comment on what is an ongoing legal matter. Well, I was going to talk to Ali a bit more, but she's disappeared. There she is. Ali, we won't expect to hear officially from Buckingham Palace to comment on this case, as they just said in that statement there. But it really will shake the royal family.
Undoubtedly, and Prince Andrew's reputation, of course, has been in tatters, frankly, for a long time. He stepped back from his royal duties in 2019 after the connection between him and Jeffrey Epstein became so difficult to manage, led to so many difficult, uncomfortable headlines for the royal family. I think Alistair Bruce put it well there when he said that for the Queen, all people will face the law equally. So she, of course, will be balancing the difficulty of this being her third child, Prince Andrew, facing these allegations and these claims, which, worth reminding people again, he has always denied, and her role as monarch. So it is an uncomfortable position for Buckingham Palace to be in. He, of course, had been hoping, I think, to rebuild his reputation, but clearly that hasn't happened, and a very significant development today.
The latest from Buckingham Palace. Thank you. You're watching Sky News. Coming up on the break, after the break, we'll have more on this breaking news. The Duke of York to be tried over allegations of sexual assault in a civil case in the United States. The case brought about by Virginia Giuffre, the Duke of York, denying the allegations. We'll have more reaction for you after this break. Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. The breaking news this afternoon: the Duke of York is to face a civil trial in the United States over claims of sexual abuse after a judge dismissed Prince Andrew's attempt to have this case thrown out. Prince Andrew has always denied the allegations made against him by a woman who says she was a teenage victim, the woman in question, Virginia Giuffre. Well, we can speak now to Mitchell Epner, a former federal prosecutor and attorney with the New York law firm Rottenberg, Lippman, Rich. Good to speak to you this afternoon. Thank you for joining us here on Sky News.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to share my knowledge with your viewers.
Yes, we very much need it because this is a civil case that is happening in the United States, so the law slightly different to what may happen in the UK. So what we would like to know from you is, now that the judge has ruled that the civil case can be brought in the US, what are the next steps?
So the next step is something called discovery. That's the process by which the parties share facts with each other. That will be composed of both document discovery, meaning that the prince would be required to hand over documents. Some of the documents that have been requested are things like his travel itineraries, his medical records that might corroborate or demonstrate the falsity of his claim that he can't sweat. There will also be depositions. Deposition is a process by which a sworn interview is taken in front of a court reporter, but not in front of a judge, by the opposing counsel. Prince Andrew would likely be sit for his deposition in the UK, but he would be under US oath, and he will be questioned by David Boies, who is, as far as most American lawyers are concerned, without peer as the greatest deposition taker in modern American jurisprudence. This is a very, very bad day for Prince Andrew.
I have looked at reports that have been coming out this afternoon. Obviously, this information about this ruling, just about an hour old, but we have known it's been coming. And there's been suggestions that any evidence given by Prince Andrew, as you put it, the deposition part, could be done either in the US or by video link in the UK, but also suggestions that he may not participate. Does he have that option?
The only way that yes, he does have that option. He could opt not to participate in one of two ways. One is he could assert his rights under the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, which bars a person from being forced to be a witness against themselves in a criminal matter. But if that were to occur, oh no, are you there?
Yes, we can still hear you.
Sorry, if that were to occur, then that fact could be presented to the jury as evidence against him in a civil case, and the judge might even rule that that fact alone creates civil liability, and the only question left would be damages. The only other way that he could avoid testifying is to simply refuse to participate in the case anymore at all and take what's called a default. Again, there would then be a ruling on liability against him, and the only thing left to be determined would be damages. So there are only bad options in front of him, and he has to decide which of these bad options is his best bad option.
OK, so they're the first two steps: discovery, deposition. There is an option, I understand as well, that it may not even get to those first two steps because there may be a settlement between Prince Andrew and the woman making these allegations, Virginia Giuffre, who's bringing about the civil case.
Well, about 95% of American cases settle before trial. So settlement is always a possibility. The question is on what terms. And from what has been released by Ms. Giuffre Roberts' attorneys, they are not interested in a settlement unless it were to be accompanied by an acknowledgement of liability and an apology. I think that the money is secondary here to both sides. Prince Andrew clearly has access to all the money in the world, even if he does not himself have that money. And Ms. Giuffre Roberts has enough money that she is not looking to this lawsuit to pay her rent next month.
OK, so it may settle. If it doesn't, it will go to discovery and depositions. Once all that information has been collected by both parties involved, then what?
Well, then you have an opportunity for final pretrial motions. In some cases, there would be an opportunity to try to get the case dismissed at that point. That is not a reasonable possibility here because there will be evidence on both sides, and the judge is not in a position to take the case away from the jury if there is evidence on both sides. So what would happen would be final pretrial preparations, and then likely a trial. I know that it's currently scheduled for September. My expectation is that the trial would not occur until closer to Christmas or early next year, just based upon the way calendars tend to work in the court. I've appeared in that court many times.
And just one final question, Mitchell Epner. What does that day in court look like? You mentioned a jury there. Will there be a jury deciding in this civil case if it does get to the point of trial? And also, will Prince Andrew and Virginia Giuffre be called on to give evidence or some kind of testimony in that court, given that they've given depositions, if you see what I mean? Will we hear from them again?
Yes, so those are two very good questions. First, with regard to a jury, yes, Virginia Giuffre Roberts in her complaint demanded a jury under the American Constitution. She has an absolute right to have this case tried to a jury. A civil jury in the United States is composed of at least 6 members, and they would have to be unanimous on any verdict. With regard to whether or not the individuals will be there in court, they are allowed to be, they are allowed to testify, they are not required to testify. But, and this is a very important caveat, even if Prince Andrew has given deposition testimony, that deposition testimony cannot be introduced by Prince Andrew. He can only testify live. The only person who could introduce the deposition testimony would be Virginia Giuffre. A party cannot introduce their own deposition testimony at trial. They are required to show up live, to be subject to cross-examination live in front of the jurors.
Okay. Mitchell Epner, a really good summary of what we can expect in this civil case brought against Prince Andrew. Thank you so much for your expertise. It's becoming so much clearer what we're looking at and what Prince Andrew will face later in the year. He, of course, denies all allegations brought by Virginia Giuffre, the woman who says she was a teenage victim of sexual abuse at the hands of the Duke of York. Right, let's have a look at the other big story today. The Prime Minister, earlier in the House of Commons, apologising after finally breaking his silence and admitting that he was at a Bring Your Own Booze party in the Downing Street Garden during national lockdown. Boris Johnson has, though, argued it wasn't a party, but a work event. Well, during a heated PMQs earlier, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, called on the Prime Minister to resign. We can listen now to the Prime Minister's statement.
Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise. I know that millions of people across this country have made extraordinary sacrifices over the last 18 months. I know the anguish that they have been through, unable to mourn their relatives, unable to live their lives as they want or to do the things they love. And I know the rage they feel with me and with the government I lead when they think that in Downing Street itself the rules are not being properly followed by the people who make the rules. And though I cannot anticipate the conclusions of the current inquiry, I have learned enough to know that there were things we simply did not get right. And I must take responsibility. Number 10 is a big department with the garden as an extension of the office, which has been in constant use because of the role of fresh air in stopping the virus. And when I went into that garden just after 6 on the 20th of May, 2020, to thank groups of staff before going back into my office 25 minutes later to continue working, I believed implicitly that this was a work event. But, Mr. Speaker, with hindsight, I should have sent everyone back inside. I should have found some other way to thank them. And I should have recognised that even if it could be said technically to fall within the guidance, there would be millions and millions of people who simply would not see it that way, people who suffered terribly, people who were forbidden from meeting loved ones at all, inside or outside. And to them and to this House, I offer my heartfelt apologies. And all I ask is that Sue Gray be allowed to complete her inquiry into that day and several others so that the full facts can be established. And I will, of course, come back to this House and make a statement.
Oh, well, let's join our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, now, who's live in Central Lobby in the Palace of Westminster. And Sam, you've been speaking to MPs as they've walked through Central Lobby after that statement from the Prime Minister this afternoon. What have they been saying to you?
There's a big discussion underway inside the Conservative Party about the Prime Minister's future. There's no doubt about that. Boris Johnson offering what many people think of as something of a qualified apology, apologising for those 25 minutes on May the 20th, 2020, in which he was outside at what other people see as a party. His line of defence is, I didn't realise it was a party. I thought it was a work event. It's enough for some MPs in public, some Tories saying we're glad that he is now apologised for what happened. But for many Tory MPs, they're asking the question whether or not that'll wash, whether it'll wash in a week or two's time when we get a report from Sue Gray, a senior official, into exactly what did happen that day and what happened in that roughly dozen or so events where Number 10 and other bits of Whitehall looked like they were celebrating. You've got meetings of the 1922 executive of Tory MPs later today. You've got several MPs coming up to me in private and saying, I think Boris Johnson is done for. Some loyalists, we heard from Conor Burns, a Northern Ireland minister, longtime friend of the Prime Minister earlier, saying, no, I think he's done the right thing. Let's give this some time to blow over, see what the report says, but I trust the Prime Minister. But there are big conversations, difficult conversations about the PM's future going on at the moment, all around me in the Palace of Westminster. It's not quite clear where this is going to end up.
Johnson's premiership is in the hands of Tory MPs, or it could be in the hands of Sue Gray, depending on the findings of her report that we are expecting perhaps at the end of next week. And you mentioned earlier on, Sam, that that might be delayed if there was an inquiry by the Metropolitan Police into that party on May the 20th. And we have had a statement from the Met today.
That's right. Now, the Met Police haven't exactly jumped at the opportunity to investigate much of the goings-on that you've been reading about and watching on Sky News. The Metropolitan Police releasing a statement really restating that position. They say that they don't like investigating breaches of coronavirus restrictions that were long ago. So at the moment, they indicate that they are unlikely to undertake any further action. But the statement from the Metropolitan Police say that could change if the Cabinet Office say something different and bring something to their attention. What does that mean? Well, that's a reference to the Sue Gray report. In other words, if this incredibly powerful civil servant now, Sue Gray, who has to determine the future of the Prime Minister of his government, says effectively in terms or explicitly in her report there was law breaking, then the Metropolitan Police could still investigate. Boris Johnson's statement, of course, was very carefully worded today to apologise if there was the perception that he'd broken the rules, but no admission that he'd broken the law, saying he thought it was a work party. That's a statement drawn up for legal reasons and also a qualified apology. The question is it going to wash with everybody? Is it going to wash with the public or not? And we're just going to have to give it some time and find out.
OK, Sam, thank you, Sam Coates, with the latest from Westminster. You're watching the Sarah Jane Mee Show here on Sky News. Coming up after the break, proceedings against Prince Andrew have been allowed to continue. A US judge has rejected the Duke's attempts to have a civil sex case against him thrown out.
Back during the Soviet era, a natural gas drilling operation collapsed into a sinkhole. And at some point, we're not exactly sure when. Some say 1971, some say the 1980s. At some point, it was lit on fire, and all of this methane gas that's coming up out of the ground lit and has remained lit ever since for about 50 years or so. And the Turkmenistan government, every few years or so, they say that they want to extinguish it and tap into that natural gas resource. The president has recently stated that's what they want to do now, and we'll see what happens. But right now, it's actually become the #1 tourist attraction in all of Turkmenistan, believe it or not. It was 2 years of planning and preparation, and I was able to bring my team into Turkmenistan with tremendous difficulty and rig fire-resistant ropes and specialized heat protective equipment and drop down to the very bottom with only 17 minutes worth of air. And the purpose was to gather soil samples from the bottom, looking for any type of bacteria living at the bottom that could give us clues as to where we might want to send our space probes in the future to look for life on other planets, because it is such an exotic place.
How did you not die?
Well, a lot of preparation, a lot of specialized custom equipment. My climbing harness had to be made out of Kevlar because a regular climbing harness would have melted from the extreme heat. I measured a ground temperature of 400 degrees Celsius. And of course, limiting your time down there is the key. I only had a certain amount of air because we didn't trust the quality of the air down there. And of course, you don't want to breathe in 400-degree air. We know it's been burning for so long, so it's understandable that there's a tremendous financial reason to tap into this natural gas that's down there. But at the same time, doing that would be extremely difficult and very expensive to do, and would basically eliminate all of the tourism money that comes in for people who want to go and view this particular place. And I've been there several times over the years, and the tourism infrastructure around the crater has really developed. When I was there in 2013, there was nothing, but now there's a fence around it. There are flush toilets. There are campsites and picnic tables. And it's actually the #1 tourist attraction. People come from all over the world to go see the gates of hell.
Hello, welcome back. Busy afternoon here on Sky News. Our top story, Prince Andrew is going to be tried over allegations he sexually assaulted Virginia Giuffre when she was underage. This is after a US judge ruled that her civil lawsuit can go ahead. Well, joining me now, Nigel Cawthorne, author of Prince Andrew, Epstein and the Palace. Nigel, good to see you this afternoon. Thank you for joining us here on Sky News.
Afternoon.
Well, this is another chapter for your book, should you wish to have another run of it come out soon. It wasn't entirely unexpected, but what do you make of the decision by the US judge today?
Well, I think it's what we expected. Judge Kaplan was pretty scathing about the arguments that Prince Andrew's defence lawyers put up. So it's taken him a bit of time to write it up, but I think we've got what we expected.
Yeah, it's definitely worth reminding people of the defence that Prince Andrew's legal team took to the US last week in terms of trying to get Virginia Giuffre's case thrown out, because it all hinged on an agreement she signed back in 2009 with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes, indeed. It was rather an extraordinary idea that his defence team came up with, because I don't think it could do Prince Andrew's reputation any good if he'd seemed to be dodging the bullet by some sleazy agreement signed by a convicted paedophile. And if the settlement agreed the non-prosecution clause that Virginia Giuffre couldn't sue anyone else involved, the court case there was about sex trafficking. So, and no one's accused Prince Andrew of sex trafficking. So he would have said he wasn't a defendant in that sort of case, which, as I say, no one's accused him of.
Nigel, in your opinion, how messy does this get? Because, of course, our correspondent Joe Pike, who's been following this story, put it succinctly earlier on, saying that the reputation of Prince Andrew is in tatters, friends with a convicted paedophile, a convicted sex trafficker, and now this. Can he come back from this? Obviously, we're not prejudging this civil trial, innocent until proven guilty. He refutes all of the allegations, but can his reputation survive either way?
Indeed, I don't think it can, because we look at that picture that you just showed in a different light now after Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction, because there we have a woman who's been convicted for sex trafficking. And we have a 17-year-old girl, Virginia Roberts, as she then was, saying that she was trafficked. And there's Prince Andrew saying that he wasn't there. It seems extraordinary. He's tried to cast aspersions on the picture, but there's been no evidence that it's in any way faked.
And just referring back to the title of your book, Prince Andrew, Epstein and the Palace. The Palace have said this afternoon that they don't comment on ongoing legal matters, but this will have shaken the royal family today.
Well, indeed, because there's money involved. If there is a settlement, which I think Virginia Giuffre is not really going for, I think she wants her day in court. She was denied that in the Maxwell case. She may be denied that in the outstanding perjury charges against Ghislaine Maxwell, which the prosecution may drop. And I think she wants to stand up in front of the world and tell the world what happened to her, or at least her version of what happened to her. So that's going to be a very expensive process. But if Prince Andrew makes a settlement, I'm sure surely the taxpayers of this country will ask exactly where this money is coming from. Already there's been disquiet about the fact that the Queen is said to be paying for his defence, which apparently Prince Charles and Prince William are rather against. But it's also been reported that the money is coming from
Nigel
the
Crawford,
Duchy
I'm
of
afraid
Lancaster.
We've run out of time, but I'm sure we will speak to you in the coming weeks as this unfolds. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you. It's 4 o'clock. You're watching the Sarah Jane Mee Show. Coming up, breaking news: the Duke of York will face a civil sex case trial in the United States after a judge dismissed the motion to have the lawsuit thrown out. Well, the case threatens to overshadow the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, which takes place this year. Also this afternoon, the Prime Minister apologises after confirming he was at a party in his Downing Street garden during lockdown, but says he thought it was a work event.
I want to apologise.